Hi, I'm Lindsay Keeley, and in this video, I'm talking about how you can take on new things, challenging tasks, and really build courage and bravery as you do something new. So, I want to begin by talking about stress and anxiety. I think so many of us naturally say, I am so stressed out, I'm so anxious when we have transitions in our lives or new experiences. So, I want to first talk about what are things that are adaptive coping strategies, or in other words, what are things that you do in the face of stress that's healthy? Because if we don't identify those things, our brains can resort to using maladaptive strategies in an effort to self-protect. And maladaptive strategies can be things that our brain does without our awareness to try to feel better, to numb out maybe certain challenging or difficult feelings. So we want to be aware of what are your go-to coping strategies that are healthy. What do you want to do when you start to feel stressed out with new transitions? And then I also want to talk about stress and normalize it and really let you know and remind myself that stress isn't always a bad thing. In fact, we have kind of some versions of stress that can be helpful and then other kinds that are not as helpful. So there's something called acute stress. And this is something like, I'm so excited for this interview, or I'm a little anxious about this talk that I'm going to give, this TED talk. And that acute stress, which is that short burst of the stress that we experience in our bodies, that can motivate us. That can motivate me personally to like, okay, it is time to make those PowerPoint slides, right? It helps me, get over my tendency towards procrastination. If a child knows that they have a spelling test the next day, that burst of acute stress can motivate them to study and build in that study habit. However, the chronic or toxic stress, that's when you're having continual stress. That cortisol, the stress hormone, is constantly bathing your brain, and that can be really challenging, not healthy for the brain. Certainly, situations like childhood trauma, really unhealthy working environments, oppressive employers, those who are really in unhealthy relationships, those are examples that could lead to chronic stress, which certainly, in that situation, we need to come up with a game plan. We need to get out. We need to have a plan to be advocates for ourselves and to really mitigate that stress. And so it's just important to identify, okay, is this acute stress? Is this like a little burst of stress that is okay, that's going to help motivate me? Or is this chronic stress that's really going to start to undermine my health? And is this a red flag saying I need to make some changes in my life to mitigate that? So whether it's acute or chronic stress, I want to give you some strategies for approaching stressful transitions or new experiences on a day-to-day basis. I have 3 steps that can really help you or your children thrive rather than just being strapped into a wild roller coaster that you feel like you have no control over. So, step 1 is to pause and do a body and brain check in. So, you pause and you take a breath. We can do one together now. Yes. So cleansing. When you do a body and brain check in, it's important to remember that you're bringing a non judgmental awareness of where you're at physiologically, your body, and where you're at psychologically, your mental state. Bringing awareness to your body for kids too can say, let's check in. Let's do a body check in. Let's start from your head to your toes. Let's take a breath in. How does your head feel? Do you have a headache? Okay, no, your head's feeling good. Okay, let's go down. What about your jaw? Do you feel like it's kind of tight? And again, as an adult, doing this for yourself is really helpful. I do this for myself too. Does it feel tight? Okay, not so much. You go down. How about your chest? Is your heart beating? You go down. How does your stomach feel? What about your hands? And it's just really grounding to be able to do a body check in, always remembering to breathe. And then you bring awareness to your thoughts. Are your thoughts filled with worry? And again, worry is a chain of negative thoughts about bad things that might happen in the future, right? So I'm worried about, let's say a child's worried about second grade. I'm worried that when I go to class, I won't make any friends and I'll have to sit by myself during lunch. Or as an adult, I'm worried that I'm going to show up for my first day of work and I'm not going to know what's expected of me and I'm going to fail and lose all the clients they give me. So those are some examples. You're just identifying what are the thoughts there. We're not judging it. We're just saying, come on, little buddy, have a seat. What's going on? What are you thinking? And then, so that's one thing. Do you have thoughts of worry? But when we pause and we just say, let's acknowledge that. Yeah, You say, I can tell you're feeling upset. It's normal to feel that way. It's okay to feel anxious. It's okay to feel frustrated. Normalize the emotion. So, step one, do a body and brain check in. And step two is to cultivate calm. Because sometimes when you breathe and take that check in, you realize my hands are sweaty. I do have a rash all over my chest, and my thoughts are worried about tomorrow, me not knowing how to work the technology yet. OSU Cascades for my first term in person. That's definitely something that I experienced when I first started teaching in higher education. So, as you do that body brain check in, if that starts to actually trigger some stress or engage your nervous system, how can we cultivate calm? So, that's the second step. Calm is creating perspective and mindfulness while managing emotional reactivity. And that comes from the book Atlas of the Heart. So, how can we create perspective and mindfulness while really managing that emotional reactivity? And first, you need to know if you are being emotionally reactive. That's the first step. And whether you acknowledge it yourself by doing a brain and body check in, or someone else helps you see that. Sometimes Thomas is my husband. If you are just now catching, maybe if this is your first episode, I've talked about Thomas before. He's sometimes a co host, but Thomas might say something. He's learned how to say this beautifully. He might say, Hey, babe, how's your brain feeling? Does your brain feel a little mixed up? And him saying that is able to help me realize, oh yeah, I might have some, emotional reactivity. My brain might feel mixed up. And that's a cue for me to cultivate calm, do something that helps me feel better and calm in that moment so that I can be a productive problem solver and so that I can approach whatever problems at hand in a calm and productive way. What helps you cultivate calm? Is it going on a walk? Is it calling up a friend and processing? For young children, is it building a brain break space? I'll put a link in the show notes about a YouTube video we have all about a brain break, which is essentially a calming toolkit. It could be a box or a basket where you put calming tools like Play-Doh, crayons, a favorite book. When you have a sand timer that you can flip, it gives a set amount of time for a child to take that break and then revisit whatever the problem is or come back to their learning. So, what can you do? What helps your glitter settle? And step three is to put it all into perspective. As we think about putting it in perspective, there's a couple things we want to think of. Number one, this experience won't last forever. So, being new in a particular situation, again, be it a job or if you're a kid starting out in second grade, it's a finite experience. And soon that newness will fade as your skills and knowledge grow. So even learning how to drive, at first, you're so focused in every movement you're hyper aware of, and then it becomes automatic. So this won't last forever. Reality check your expectations. So what are your current expectations of yourself? And are those realistic and attainable in the timeline that you've set out? Another thing to remind yourself, so in addition to telling yourself, this won't last forever, I'm going to reality check my expectations. Number three, remind yourself you can do hard things. Tell yourself this. I can do hard things. I was just in my mom's second grade classroom. It was lovely. I got to spend a week with her in Florida in her classroom. I got to visit. And that was what we told ourselves. We can do hard things. I can do hard things. Reminding ourselves of our resilience and to remind yourself of challenging transitions or situations that you've made it through in the past. Ask yourself, how was I able to do that and make it through that transition? What helped me? What didn't help? And ultimately, did I make it through that? Am I standing here today? Yes, I am. I made it through that hard thing. Even if it felt like an epic fail, you still made it through and you learned something. And number four, what is on the other side of that discomfort? With kids, we can tell them on the other side of that first day of school is you realizing that you can do hard things and that doing hard things makes your brain stronger. And so when we do these challenging tasks, when we make it through these first experiences, as we're new learners, we learn that we have it in us. We have the strength that it takes to survive challenging, awkward, new experiences. And we come out on the other side with new skills. We are able to build new productive and healthy coping strategies, as I talked about before. We are able to learn from our mistakes. And ultimately, that makes us braver and more resilient. If you're starting a new year at the school or whatever new thing you're taking on, I wish you well, and I will talk with you soon.